Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us on this snowy Thursday. Sorry for the big pivot there, but why not? Since we can. Um, like Valerie said, there was a little bit of she had a challenge getting in. So while the chalet is looking gorgeous, Philip, we hope that it's warming someone there at least. Um, Thank you everyone for joining us today. This is going to be a really great opportunity for us to connect and hear from each and every one of you. In case you don't know who I am, my name is Karen Zumak and I'm the current chair of the Minnesota Shade Tree Advisory Committee. And I'm real happy to be here from the warm confines of my house. We're going to do a little presentation from Valerie, who's our state DNR urban forestry coordinator. We also have Jill Johnson here, who's representing the U.S. Forest Service. And we're going to talk about this amazing thing that happened. If you haven't heard, there are quite a few dollars available for urban and community forestry efforts over the next 10 years. And this is your opportunity to let Valerie and Jill and all of us kind of hear what it is that you think would be something important and impactful to advance urban and community forestry in your own communities. So amazing opportunity, generational opportunity. We're talking about 1.5 billion with a B dollars for urban and community forestry. So when you think about the deficit mindset that we've had to operate under for so long, this is the time to think about abundance, right? Like how can we really make a change to increase the tree canopy in areas where it's needed most, to maintain it where we have it, and really make sure that we have a green and leafy future for the residents of Minnesota into the future. So with that, I will turn it over to Valerie and I will keep an eye on the chat. This is going to be a little bit clunky, I think, just because we are hoping to do like a whiteboard session. So we're going to be doing that part online. So we'll be switching over to Jamboard when we do that, but we'll give you instructions on how to get to that. So Valerie, feel free to take it away.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Karen. And yes, thank you to Philip for getting the chalet together and getting firewood prepared. And, we're hopeful that we'll be able to all get together in person soon and enjoy that magical space. But until we solidify that, we'll hold off on details. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Valerie McClanahan. I'm the Urban and Community Forestry Coordinator at the Department of Natural Resources. And for those of you who aren't familiar, since I can't see who is all in the room virtually, our jurisdiction is typically considered to be all non-state land. So we work with municipalities, counties, so water conservation districts. We also work with residents. Typically, we're looking at 20 acres or less when we're talking about residents. And we also work to serve the industry as a whole through your professional associations like MSA and things like that, as well as nonprofit organizations that work in urban and community forestry spaces. So with that, I mean, as you can hear from all of all of that jurisdiction, everything we do is in partnership. So your role in this is ultimately the key piece of us being able to get this good work done, because you are the folks who are out there really doing the work. So I want to thank you all for being here, for the work that you're consistently doing year round. And I'm just excited for this, unprecedented, once in a lifetime amount of funding. Hopefully it'll be twice in a lifetime. We'll get another round of it in 2032 when this comes up. But we'll wait and see. So, well, how about also, since we're in the heat of it, Craig is on, so we don't have to. I know he's got a busy day ahead of him. Why don't we get the legislative update from, because I was going to talk about state funding currently and where things are at and what our goals are. But I think that, Craig, if you are able and willing to step in and just talk about kind of what things are looking like at the legislature, because, we at DNR, we are putting in a request for more funding. We're hopeful that things will move forward. But Craig is the one with the magic 8 ball to tell us whether or not that'll happen.
I can do that. And I look forward to hearing, your update as well. So for those who do not know me, my name is Craig Johnson. I am with the League of Minnesota Cities. We're the statewide organization, represents cities across the state. There's 854 cities in Minnesota. 837 of them are members of the league, and the ones that aren't are all under 200 in population. So we pretty much represent all the cities of the state. And we do that through education and training for cities, as well as advocacy with the state legislature, state agencies, and federal work. I cover energy, land use, and the environment, and I also serve on the MnSTAC board as the league's representative there. And the short version that I want to give you is this is the start of a new biennium. For those who remember civics class, Minnesota runs on a 2-year cycle legislatively, and it starts the January after an election, a general election, and goes for 2 years. The first year is normally a very, very busy one. It starts right away in January, first Tuesday after the first Monday of January. That means it starts on the 3rd of January this year. And it will run through mid-May when it constitutionally is required to end. It very, very seldom ends early, and very, very frequently has had to go into the summer on special legislative sessions, but unlikely this time with Democrats now with the majority in the House, Senate, and in the governor's office. We also have, as many of you have probably seen, a very large one-time state surplus, 17.6 billion with a B dollars that is so far projected to be available over the next 2 years. That is a moving number. Every time the future economy shifts, that number will shift because it's a projection of money available in the future, not a measure of money that's sitting on a table somewhere already. But it does mean we are in a very, very strong one-time surplus situation. There is not an indication that there is a massive ongoing surplus, that we are collecting way more taxes than we need. There is just an indication that we have collected way more taxes than we thought we would over the past 2 years in particular. So what that means is the legislature will be looking at where they can spend that money. And some of it probably will go for various tax reliefs, but they have to be very careful with that, because if they do spending that has what in politics is called tails, meaning it affects not just this 2-year period, but future 2-year periods, they could get in trouble in a hurry where they've created more spending than we have money coming in those out years. And in Minnesota, budgets must be balanced. We cannot have a state budget that spends more money in the future than is projected to be coming in. So that will be the limit. And it'll take some discipline, but there is a lot of one-time money available that could be spent in the next biennium. I mean, a third as much as we normally spend over 2 years. Our state budget is normally about $51 to $52 billion. And this is $17.6 billion. So it's a lot of money. The balance of the legislature will be a little different. And could work to the advantage of funding for urban forestry in the upcoming biennium. DNR obviously has been supporting an ongoing source of funding for these types of programs. The governor has been supportive of that. The House Environment Chair, who will remain the same, it will continue to be Rick Hansen as chair of the Environment Committee in the House, has been very supportive of building urban forestry, not just into one-time funding, but into base funding in the budget. And the Senate now has a 1-vote Democrat majority. So the new environment budget chair is Senator Nick Frentz from the Mankato area. And that will be probably a very different approach to looking at some of the urban forestry things than we have had for the past few years when Senator Ingebrigtsen was that chair. The other thing that's still an unknown is there is a second committee in the Senate that will have some environmental responsibilities, represented and chaired by Senator Herr from St. Paul. It will have some natural resources policy and money going through it, but it is unclear how they're going to actually structure that right now. I don't expect it would include urban forestry money for DNR. I think that will be going through Senator Friends's committee. But as far as the short outlook, the governor's budget won't come out until February. We'll then know, right around the early part of February, what the governor intends to propose for the administrative agencies as spending. And that will be, our signal for where things are at as a baseline, and we can work off of that. There is no guarantee that the governor's proposals even get considered in the legislature. They can just be ignored. But given that it's Democrats running both the House and the Senate, we expect the governor's budget will be introduced in the form the governor wants it, and will then be amended from there with the way the House and the Senate would like to make changes to it. I think I will just stop there because this is all just very generic stuff, and see, Karen, how do you want to do it? Do you want to try and take questions, or do you want to just watch chat for that? Or
yeah, I guess if anyone has any questions for Craig specifically, I will start if I can, but you can also put them in the chat. I've got my eyes on that on my other screen. So my question would be, Craig, if you could name one or two things that the other, 85 or so people on this call today could do. Do you have any suggestions on how we can continue to support urban and community forestry funding here in the state of Minnesota?
that is an excellent question. So the first thing is, do not be afraid to contact your state representative and state senator. If you don't know who they are, on the legislative website, there is a link. It says, who represents me? You literally type your address in and it tells you everybody elected to represent you all the way up through federal government and how to contact them. So very, very handy thing. They do prefer contact from people who live and work in their district, but it's not a requirement. It just means it'll weigh more heavily on them than it would otherwise. And don't be afraid if you've got coworkers or others in your community that you think would also be willing to make a call on that, to have them do the same thing and encourage them as elected officials to get funding in place for urban forestry issues, and give them a short description of why that is important. So how is it helping the community? What are the risks to the community? What are the costs that the community can't afford without some state help? It can be anything that matters to you, but make it short and make it somewhat urgent, and be as specific as you can. Say that you want state-based funding for urban forestry, or that you want a substantial increase in funding available for communities to manage emerald ash borer, or whatever the thing is that you would describe. Do that and get others in your community to do it with you. If a legislator gets 5 contacts from the public, they start asking staff to research and figure out what the heck is going on that has so many people contacting them. As long as it's not a form letter. Form letters, then they probably need 100 of those to wake up. But I see in chat the question of how best to contact them. Almost all of them are pretty used now to handling email, and a lot of them have an email account specified to do that. In the Senate, some even have a special side process that you have to go through to send them an email to make sure they know you're a constituent and things right up front. But you can also call their office and either leave a message on their voicemail or with their legislative assistant. That works just fine as well. And there's even a chance you'll get a call back. I don't know. Depends on the legislator. I think that's probably the best things you can do. And then of course, pay attention to the MnSTAC updates, because if a bill starts doing anything, most likely you will hear about it there.
Yes, and Molly has a question about the reduction in state funding. Do you have any updates on that? Or Molly, did you have something that you want?
Oh, no, and I feel like I should follow up with Valerie and Emma. I don't know that I can, but I think that'd be an important point, is like the severe reduction in funding would be important to point out. New representatives or senators aren't aware of that change.
Thank you, Molly. Yeah, and I'll be talking about what that reduction is looking like, because that was already set in the legislature to be happening. But yeah, that's a really good point, that they may not recall that we had been at 1.7 million, and we're headed into fiscal year 23 that with going into only 400,000. So yeah,
and so to finish on that, I guarantee you they won't remember, because a third of the legislature was not in the legislature last year. So they're brand new, and especially on the environment committees, there are a lot of freshman members that are there for their first time. So it is going to take some direct outreach from those of us who are around the Capitol and from the DNR to make sure that they know what the history on this program is and why that is a concern. They're not even going to. There's no test to get into the legislature. These people have not already come in and are now on the environment committee because they answered 3 questions right about emerald ash borer and urban forestry. There's no test. They're just put on the committee. They will not know anything about this unless their innate interests or background give them some base knowledge. So it's going to be up to us to help educate them on it. As the question from Emily on lobbying effort from LMC, urban forest funding has been on our list of priority issues for, I think, 10 years now, and will continue to be there. This is an ongoing issue for cities across an increasing segment of the state, and it's not going away. So we will continue to push for ongoing and one-time funding for urban forestry and emerald ash borer management.
And we will most certainly be reaching out to all of you as the session begins. And if there are, communities that we might need to hear from, especially loudly, like Craig mentioned, that Senate committee, really focusing on Mankato is really a great opportunity for greater Minnesota's needs to be addressed. So there's some really great opportunity for us to bring this awareness. It's going to be a lot more work, right? Because we have all those people that we're going to need to educate again on this issue. And, it's definitely not something that's going away. So, Craig, thank you so much for joining us and finagling your way in.
The only other last thing I would add is I've already got the list of who will be on the various committees in the House. That should be going out publicly this morning. And the Senate should also be announcing who will be on their committees before the end of the week. So at that point, you can also then look and see if any of your local legislators are on that committee, because that will matter. The other thing I would point out is both the House and the Senate now have committees that have climate and climate impacts as part of their titles. So that could also be a place where we will see some of this discussion occurring. And the House has a new committee called Sustainable Infrastructure, chaired by Representative Cagle. And it is entirely meant on focused on how do we make sure the money the state is putting into infrastructure is addressing the need for climate adaptability and resilience. And I can't imagine that we can't get at least some discussion in that committee of urban forestry and public spaces, because that does count as infrastructure. So we'll be pushing this in a lot of different ways, and you can also follow the league and what we are working on by going to our website at lmc.org. And there is a sign up there for the city's bulletin. You don't have to be a city to do it, but you can be. And what it does is during the legislative session, our legislative team writes up quick summaries on things that are moving quickly that week or the next week, and put those summaries in an email summary sheet that you can then click on if one of the titles is something that you're interested in. So you get a weekly email from the league telling you what things we have been working on over the past week and see coming up. It's free, and it's only minorly irritating. It's not 3 emails a day or anything like that. So comes once a week during the legislative session and every other week between legislative sessions. Thank you guys for your time and interest on this, and thanks in advance for the help we will need.
Hold on, Craig. It looks like Gail has a question.
Thanks, Karen.
Mhm.
In regards to this, it's exciting to hear about the sustainability at starting. What is the likelihood of the legislature having an appetite for maintenance? Because a lot of tree planting dollars certainly going in, but a lot of times there isn't any funding for that basic maintenance. Obviously, we can't fund it long term, but is there any potential maybe to put in some dollars for even some follow-up maintenance, watering? You know, obviously in these drought times, we've struggled to keep things watered, and it's hard to see those resources, those trees die, for example. So do you think that there would be more of an appetite for discussion on that, Craig?
Excellent question. And it goes back to the thing I started off with, and you pointed out, the tails are the thing that the legislature will have to be very careful about, is future spending that might be coming or be forced because of a decision. But as far as one time, I think it could very much be put into the discussion. I don't think it would come as a surprise to legislators who have been working on this for a long time that that's an issue. You know, I think Representative Hansen will be more than aware that this is an ongoing problem that's going to take not just tree planting money, but whether they have enough money in the environment section of the budget to do it will be the question. And you know, what pot of money they are allowed to take from. So it's certainly an issue that can be raised, though.
Thanks, Craig.
Mm-hmm. Guys, have a great meeting. I'm going to run off to go talk to drinking water supervisors at their legislative meeting. So have a great morning.
Thank you so much, Craig.
Thanks, Craig.
Bye-bye.
All right, Valerie, Ryan. Are we?
Ryan, you good to pull up, share my PowerPoint for me? Because apparently my computer doesn't like Zoom at all. Yay. Oh, look at that. All right, let's just jump to that second slide there. So, so like we were saying earlier, you know, so fiscal year 22, fiscal year 23, we had 1.7 million in total from the general fund legislature. They did say entails means it's ongoing for 400,000. So as of right now, we stand to, on July 1 of 2023, going forward for the rest of time, to have $400,000 specifically for EAB and ash management. So that funding does not allow for treatment, unfortunately, but does allow for removals, planting, management plans, inventories, and things like that. So that grant is currently open. And so if you're a community who is looking to apply for these funds, Emma, I know is on here. She can put the link into the chat there for where you can access the RFP. And I want to just say that you know, we know that there is a significant need for ongoing funding and significantly more funding. So since 2019, our state funded programs have totaled in $7.8 million in funding, but we've received $14.5 million in requested funds. So that means we've only been able to fund about 56% of the applications we've received. So that's a huge gap. And on top of that, you know, all of those grants, they had a maximum dollar amount of anywhere between $30,000 to $150,000. We were consistently being asked for the maximum dollar amount. So, you know, we know that it's likely that these communities require more funding than what we even allowed for them to ask for. So we know that there is a need for sustained ongoing funding for these communities. So with that, I think we can jump to the next slide to say kind of what we're hoping to do about that. So we have put in a request. I've been officially allowed to talk about it, kind of. A lot of the times these things are a little more secretive for whatever reason, but I've been approved to say that we know that DNR as a whole, as an agency, understands the need for community support in urban community forestry. We are asking for funding, and we are guiding the legislature to attach that funding to a statute that has received funding in the past. It's statute 88.82. It's called Minnesota Relief. Ultimately, this funding would hopefully do all of the things that are listed in the actual statute itself. So allow for maintenance, like Gail was talking about, allow for protection and treatment, like we've consistently been saying we need in order to maintain the canopy that we have. This also would provide an opportunity, if written the way that I'm hoping it's written, the legislature can alter things. They could refer to 88.82, but then provide additional specifics. It's still up to them as to how this gets pulled off and navigated. But the hope is that this funding would also allow for us to do work on private property, not just, including things like subsidized tree sales, including actual maintenance, including providing assistance for tree removal for residents who need that. All of that would have to, we don't have the statutory authority to do a direct grant program, so we would still be relying on our partners, so our cities and nonprofits or counties or any local unit of government to be able to provide that support. So we would have the funding, we would make it available to you in order to make it available to the community. So that's our goal for this legislative session, is to obtain a significant amount of funding through this. So in addition to that, we're hoping with that funding, we would also be able to increase our staffing. We are consistently short-staffed. So I think like everybody and their brother is short-staffed right now, I feel like. But there's so much work that needs to get done, and we need more hands to do it. So Emma and Molly and we're amazing, but we need more people. So with that, I think unless there are, maybe we stop for questions around the state request. If there are any.
Not seeing anything in the chat right now. Don't see anyone's hand raised.
I'm not good
Love
at
it.
raising my hand.
Oh, go ahead, Greg.
I'm 100% in favor of following this program as much as we can and try and encourage not any modifications and changes. I think in reading this, it covers everything. And I can speak for us, the specifics of some of the grants now are starting to become a little bit more difficult to manage, as quite honestly, removals are ramping up. And in the end, it's going to be which funds pay for what. And I start to believe that some regular maintenance may fall to the wayside to deal with EAB. So that would be my recommendation, as much as possible moving forward as grants, make them as available to any type of thing you can, would be fantastic.
Great point. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
So this could be one of those things where we may find ourselves asking and reaching out to you all about keeping this language as it is. You know, we know that oftentimes there are just little tweaks that can really change the nuance of what we're trying to push forward. So that would be another one of those times when Craig said 5 times, he was not kidding. That's all it takes to hear from 5 constituents about an issue, and then it becomes a level of interest for those legislators. So it's not going to take a lot of us, but it certainly could help to take all of us. So, all right, Valerie, continuing on.
Excellent. So with that, we're not asking for quite as much as I had wanted us to ask for as a state agency, but we are asking for a fair amount of money. So that's the one thing I cannot share is the actual dollar amount that we're requesting. But I would say, the Environmental Quality Board has recommended dollar amounts around EAB specifically. And so we know that's something that the state has been on board with at different points in time. And then Karen, I trust whatever dollar amount Karen says we should have at the state level. So just feel free to ask her what she thinks, and we can go with that. So, it's helpful if we're all kind of saying generally the same message of saying what it is that we need, and that can just be really helpful if the message is consistent going forward. So, excellent. All right. Well, with that, do you want to jump to the next slide for me, Ryan? Excellent. All right. So the Inflation Reduction Act, I don't know how many of you have been keeping tabs on this, but it is an incredible amount of money. So $1.5 billion to provide multi-year programmatic competitive grants to state agencies. I'm not going to list out all of the eligible entities here, but the way that it's listed in the legislation is that it is for urban and community forestry assistance programs for tree planting and related activities. So I think with that, since we have Jill on the line and she has agreed to provide the talking points that are available to the public at this time, I'm gonna rely on her to be that voice. So Jill, if you are able.
Yes, I'm here. Good morning, everyone. I will turn my camera on here. Nice to see you all. First off, I just want to say that this is great. I really appreciate Karen, MnSTAC leadership, Valerie, your state agency leadership in getting this listening session together. So I think it's really a great first step. Just to put things in context, when we talk about $1.5 billion being a lot of money, some of you may not track nationally what we typically have. It is hovered around $25 to $30 million a year nationally for as long as I remember the program being established. So for the last 30 years. So it hasn't gone up with the cost of living. It has stayed. And so when Karen and Valerie talk about the fact that we have been in sort of a position of penny pinching, that is definitely the status of our program over the years. So 1.5 billion is over 10 years, but it is not going to be spread out over the 10 years. That $1.5 billion is available to us now, and we know there is a huge need out there. So we intend to get the funding out to organizations as quickly as possible. Like likely in the next few years, we would like to get that money out. And we also want to demonstrate that there is an ongoing need and opportunity to keep funding levels up at a point that addresses all of our urban and community forestry issues and needs on the ground. So we don't have a lot of information right now about what it's going to look like in terms of a program that's going to be rolled out, other than the same types of activities that we currently fund through our program are still going to be available. And the same entities that are currently available to receive our funding is still going to be the case. So as Valerie said, there's a long list of types of organizations that we can provide funding to. To just cut to the chase, it's almost every type of organization other than private businesses that are eligible to receive funds. And the type of work for tree planting and related activities, we think very, very broadly, and related activities. For us, that is anything related to urban and community forestry program management. So that is including treatment of trees, removal of trees, planting, obviously, and establishment of trees, even site preparation for planting. We can't fund construction, but when you talk about getting a site ready, if that means removing impervious pavement in order to install trees, I consider that site preparation. So up to a certain extent, we just can't be building buildings. So hopefully that helps a little bit. Priority is going to be placed on activities and programs that are focused on disadvantaged or underserved communities. So that, I would say, is a critical first step for you to be zeroing in and developing programs of work that help disadvantaged or underserved communities. The good news is that if your program or project is focused on underserved communities, there is a very good chance and likely to waive any match. So in the past, our program has always, as with most of our state and private forestry programs, required a 1-to-1 match for the funding. And with this, because we have been identified as what's the Biden-Harris administration calls a Justice 40 program, where 40% of the benefits of the urban and community forestry program need to be focused on underserved and disadvantaged communities. Because we're a Justice 40 program, we want to make sure and to make it as easy as possible for organizations to focus on underserved communities, and therefore we can waive that match requirement. So that's a huge step for us. We don't know when a request for applications is going to go out, but we anticipate soon. Obviously not likely by the end of this fiscal year, or sorry, this calendar year, by the end of the month, but likely sometime early in the, certainly in, we would imagine in the first half of next year, in calendar year 23. We have internal steps that we have to go through in order to get that RFP approved. And so that's what we don't know. In some cases, we have a lot of hurdles because many organizations are receiving this IRA money, we call it, the Inflation Reduction Act money. And so there are many organizations in line and agencies in line to try to get their RFP approved. So we have hurdles in many cases. In other cases, the urban and community forestry program has become much more popular than we ever have been in the past. And in some cases, those hurdles and roadblocks have been removed for us as a barrier, and we have been like streamlined and taken to the top of the list for priority. So we just don't know. It's almost day to day. And so that's why we don't know when that RFP will come out. I'm trying to think of what other things might be helpful. We work historically hand in hand with the state forestry agencies very, very closely. And so they will, and we have an opportunity because of that to get funding and to get an RFP out in cooperation with our state forestry agencies sooner than what a public facing RFP looks like. So very soon we anticipate a request for proposals type guidance that goes out to our state agencies that'll come out sooner than we expect the RFP for public organizations to come out. So working closely with the state forestry agency, I know Valerie has been working tirelessly to think about what that program of work will look like in the state of Minnesota. So I'm just looking over at my talking points to see if I missed anything. I guess just to be thinking big, because there is a lot of money available, we are likely not going to be funding really small grants that are project focused, like a tree planting in a community. On the national scale, that RFP is likely to be wanting to fund organizations that have bigger programs of work that might include a grant program to communities, possibly a workforce development component. It doesn't have to be, but certainly whatever that program of work is, that might involve inventories and management plans, funding for staff and capacity building. It might include the tree planting, it might include removal, it might include treatment, it might include, so just think about a program of work rather than a specific project, if that's helpful. So I think those are the big talking points that I have, but I'm happy to open it up for questions, Valerie, if you wanted to take those now, or we can wait till the end.
Yeah, I think now would be good, and then we'll kind of, I think we'll probably gloss over some of those other potential funding sources and jump into it. So I think let's start there. It looks like so Karen put the Justice 40 information in the chat. Also, there is a map. I should have had that pulled up. That's been kind of running around for specific geographic areas of work that the Biden administration is viewing as areas of concern. And so I have a question here from Lauren. Sorry, I may have missed this. Is the 1.5 billion able to be spent on private properties as well, or is this money specifically for public tree management?
Great question. And we don't have a lot of specifics on that. We do know that private tree addressing trees on private land is allowable. What we don't know is enough information about how do you protect that tree and make sure that public funds that are used to pay for that tree that gets planted on private land is going to be available and survive and establish across the change of property ownership. So if someone else buys the property, and unfortunately we've seen this happen with some of our other grants where we funded private tree planting, and then a new owner comes in and the trees haven't been in the ground even 2 years, and the private new owner cuts everything down. So we have some, I think at this point, draft language in about how can you ensure that that tree is going to remain in the landscape. However, if it comes to removing trees on private land, you don't have that issue. And so I believe a program of work that involves helping underserved with removal of trees because they're maybe dead standing as part of a larger program to help improve the urban and community forest, then that would work. So good question. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of details around the private tree planting side, other than there needs to be some assurance that that tree won't be removed with the next property owner.
Excellent, thank you. It looked like there was a comment from Emily on statewide wood utilization and waste consortium. So I don't know if that's a question, if that would be eligible, or if that's just a like, let's do this kind of cheerlead mode, but I love it. Any thoughts on that, Jill?
No, I just think that that definitely falls into what I would consider a program of work, is one of the components.
Excellent.
Urban wood utilization, absolutely.
Love it, love it. We're ready. We're ready for that. It looks like there's a hand up from Dylan Kelly.
Yeah, thank you. So my question is around eligibility for, or how these funds may be able to support national service programs such as AmeriCorps. We have a number represented in the room, and looking around, I see members and site supervisors of national service programs in the call today. So I'm wondering whether national service programs will be eligible to apply directly to the funds, or whether it would be an eligible expense for a municipality, say, that's applying to be able to include funding for hosting AmeriCorps members to help with some of this work.
And I would addendum that also, maybe as a state agency, we have a career pathways consortium where we're asking for a lot of money because we have a lot of organizations that are doing really amazing work in the core space. So just throwing that one out there too.
Yeah, I don't know enough about, I'm a big fan of AmeriCorps programs. I believe they would be eligible at the national level to apply as long as there isn't already federal, funds that are being used. Like if you are working with underserved and you go for the match waiver, not an issue. You just can't use federal funds to match a federal grant. So I don't see why there wouldn't be eligibility at any of those scales. So national, state, or at a smaller organization, more local organization level to support those. And I do think that the larger level, like what you mentioned, Valerie, with the Career Pathways program, seems like a great opportunity at the state level, like to include that in the state's program of work. So hopefully that answered your question, Dylan.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.
Looks like if I can just jump in for a second, we did kind of jump over Don Smith's question about would there be funding for community nonprofits whom assist park and recreation departments?
Thank you, Karen.
Yes, yep, absolutely.
Hannibal.
Good morning. I'd like to second Jill's comments about what a great opportunity this is through MnSTAC. Thank you for all your hard work, and it's nice to be a part of a meeting that is so focused on the urban forest and what we're doing in the future. With that, I was wondering if there's any anticipated restrictions on what we can use this funding for. For instance, remote sensing of entire trees in a city. We're embarking upon using LiDAR to try to actually figure out what our entire inventory is citywide, both private and public. And it's getting up there in the towards like $100,000 to do some of the more advanced techniques that we wanted to do. Some of that work can include an actual health inventory of the entire canopy as well. So I was wondering if that was something that could be funded. Also municipal grants, so grant opportunities that cities can offer for chemical injection of both ash, elm, and oak trees. And then also research led by either cities or the university. Are any of those things, would any of those programs or anything like that be funded through these dollars?
Great questions. Nice to see you, Hannibal. Yes, yes, and yes are the short answers. I do want to say that these are competitive funds. And so I just want to emphasize that the most successful proposals will have a focus on underserved communities. So as long as you can demonstrate that the work you're doing is focused on disadvantaged and underserved communities. So I say that because it's hard to say if your community in particular is deemed underserved or disadvantaged in its entirety. So make sure your programs of work have that focus in order to be the most competitive. And I would say the same thing on the chemical treatment side and the same thing on the research side, but land grant universities are, named as organizations that we hope to work hand in hand with.
Excellent. So with that, I don't know how many more questions there aren't. I kind of disconnected there from the screen for a minute. But I feel like this is a good opportunity for us to, because I hope that everyone's juices are flowing and you're inspired by this gargantuan amount of money to do good work. Karen, do you want to kind of walk through the Jamboard?
Yes, Hannibal, I swear we didn't, or for everyone, we didn't have Hannibal toss that question to lead us to this, but it really is a great opportunity to lead us to where we're looking to go next, which is If any of you are familiar with the Google platform Jamboard, it's kind of like having a virtual whiteboard, or one of those, like as we would have had set up at the chalet, a bunch of easels with white pads on them and sticky notes for everyone to put up their kind of wants and dreams, because really this is about taking inventory of what it is that we could see as a programmatic shift for the state of Minnesota. So what does that look like? Well, we can't know unless we hear from all of you. So we're hearing about maintenance, we're hearing about watering, we're hearing about LIDAR, we're hearing about injections and preservation, and then thinking about it through the lens of that EJ40. Those are all things that we're going to be considering. And if we were to go forward as like the state of Minnesota putting in a multiple year, multiple millions of dollars grant proposition, the idea would be to have that be all kind of rolling into all of those things that are getting deemed important. Because if we can go in as a state together, there's a really great opportunity to be more competitive that way. So I think Ryan, he's put it in the chat. So if we can have you, let's see, should I share my screen? Maybe I'll share my screen. Stand by. You guys have all been extremely patient. Now I'm working on 2 different machines, so it's really going to get dodgy here. So hang on one second. Take your sticky note and shove it. No. Come on, Zoom. All right. And I'm moving towards sharing. And we're going to go over here. All right. Can you see my screen with the Jamboard on it? Not yet. Now you can though, right?
There we go. It's coming. There it is.
Okay. So we've set up a bunch of slides here for you to kind of scan through. Let's go over there to that one. I'm on an old surface, everybody, so cut me some slack.
I'm just glad that I'm not the only one having weird tech issues this morning.
Well, it's the universe. Maybe Mercury is in retrograde. All right, stand by one more time. So in any event, Jamboard works like this. If you go up to the top, you can kind of see how you can scroll through.
Ryan put the link in the chat again, so go ahead and click on that if you're seeing that or haven't gotten there yet.
Okay, so there's a bunch of different pages here. What you're going to do is go over to this little thing that says sticky note, and you can pick your color if you'd like, or you can just go right in there and you can type, I love trees and I want everyone else to too. And then you hit save, and that's going to populate over there. And then what we're looking for is, what would that need look like? What do you need to have somebody, to have your community love trees the way that you do? Is it an outreach person? Is it having some sort of additional funding or capacity building in your community? So in each slide, I have kind of some, general ideas of what I'd like in my community. I would love an urban forest master plan for my small community, but my community doesn't have any kind of technical resources. But what if we could, as a state, contract with a larger consulting company that could help us facilitate these master plans, so that we can really make sure we're creating this generational shift for urban and community forestry management. So if you could put your needs in blue, so if you have something that you really want and something that you think you need, if you can kind of pair those together as you move through these, there's planning, there's planting, we'd move on to mature tree care, and that's something we've heard about with Hannibal and everyone in the chat there. We'd love to be able to prune those trees before we need to. Imagine that, right? And having the staff and the ability to do that. So how can we make those things happen? And then you can just kind of slide through here and put those Post-its on there. And we'd love to just kind of get a general sense of the things that you would need to advance your urban and community forestry programming. So we've got this educational piece. I don't know if many of you are familiar with what happens in Wisconsin, but the Wisconsin Urban Forest Council has put together this municipal kind of forestry boot camp for any kind of employee that's working in urban and community forestry, just to kind of create a standard of knowledge. That might be a really cool thing for us to muster here in Minnesota. Career pathways, acknowledging more of that work that's being done with the apprenticeship program. Is that a pathway? Should we be looking at a municipal apprenticeship program? Everyone get the gist? And then of course, we have to throw a little shout out to Taylor Swift and our wildest dreams. So what are those things that are just like absolutely bonkers? But let's put it in there and let's see if we can find a bucket for that to fit in, because this is, as far as urban and community forestry goes, we are in the wildest dreams category with $1.5 billion.
Yeah. I think this is the time to do those dream big moments of what are the things that you've been needing this whole time. What are the things that you wish that you had? What are some of the caveats too? If you're like, we want to do work on private property, or we want to see work done on private property, but we really need a nonprofit organization to kind of lead those efforts. We want to do work on private property, but we really just want to help our community with removals, or we just want to help them with subsidized tree plantings or things like that. Give me some of those caveats too. I want to know kind of what your priorities are. I want to know what your barriers are to making these things happen, because the legislation, and we've been hearing it over and over again, this IRA funding is for programs, not projects, right? So we want to look at how do we expand on the programs that you're already doing amazing work. How do we expand on that and really fit the spaces of those underserved communities and beyond that we, of the work that we haven't been doing before. So thank you so much for any and all of your effort that you can put towards this. I'll take as many specifics as possible because that's how we're going to get that work done. I need to know. If you want to reach out to me also at any point in time, I'll put my contact information in the chat here in a second. If you just want to have these conversations of like, well, here's what I'm thinking, here's the dream. But also, what I would say is if you're interested in participating in a program, of something that you're listing out, if we can come in with partnerships in advance, I feel like we're going to be more successful if we're just ready to go. And so let me know if you're like, if you're doing this, if you're putting in money for this, Valerie, let me know, because we want in. I want to know those things. So I got a question. It looks like we got a question here, maybe a number of questions. How long will the whiteboard be available to add ideas? I think we could have this ongoing. I'll end up checking it at the end of the day today for sure, and then probably again within the next week. I don't know, Karen, what do you think?
Yeah, I think leaving it open as long as we can makes a lot of sense. Maybe at least until the end of the year, Valerie.
I love that.
Seems like a good, so people who maybe are watching the video webinar can kind of also add in. So feel free to share amongst your networks if there are other opportunities for you to get the word out about this. More info is always better than less. So.
Yeah, yeah. And what I would say is this is really an initial this is a starting point, right? Like we're you know, I have a lot of conversations with a lot of the folks in this room about your needs, but having it all kind of cohesively in this one space, I think is going to be really helpful and really impactful as we're kind of trying to move this forward and take these things up. So I would say it's also very possible that we're going to have to do some follow-up sessions on here's what we're thinking. This is what we're thinking it'll look like, and here's more of the specifics of it. What do you think? And so again, this is the starting point, and just appreciate any time and effort you can put towards it.
So for those of us that are a little bit technology challenged, I did click on the link and it wouldn't allow me to go there, and that could be the securities from work.
It could be.
Can I send an email to somebody? Would that be
Of course, yes.
Valerie, Karen combination thereof?
Yes, yeah. Well, send it to both of us. We'll see who gets there first. And yeah, the one thing I found is that it doesn't work in Microsoft Edge. Chrome, it works really well in the Jamboard. So heads up there. But yeah, it could also definitely be your work computer securities, because mine don't usually allow me to do Google things either. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, I had that brief like, oh no, what about Google? So if there are, feel free to send emails to info@MnSTAC.org. We can put the information in the chat too on who to send those emails to if you're having trouble adding your info. But it looks like we're getting some good stuff in there, so that's great. I'm going to delete the ones that I put in here so we're not getting confused.
Thanks, Karen.
Too bad we can't get Glenn's music up right now. That would be good.
I know, right?
I will, Karen.
Or?
Well, yeah. Karen deleted one, but I guess I'll put
that was mine.
Right, but you put one in that I ironically was talking with a different tree cohort yesterday that Hennepin County has out there, and I know I've talked with Karen and Valerie and probably Emma in the past that I think one thing that could help us statewide is whatever we can do to I'm going to guess potentially bolster the communications and education formats, and I would think it's probably best done on the MnDOT website, because that, or the DNR website, because that then becomes statewide. But trying to, in the forefront, get as much forestry and especially EAB information out that is consistent and correct. So we're not all trying to do different things, and that may be even toolkits to how to better engage your community. If anybody's got great ideas, it's just one of the things off the top of my head.
Yeah, I want to also add in here, I'm watching folks add in agreements to things that folks are doing. I love that. I really appreciate that, because it's kind of like more yes votes of like this. That helps me see where some of that priority is. And so I really appreciate that. So please keep that up. If you see something that you're like, absolutely, please do this, please put that in. So and keep in mind, we don't have, like Jill was saying, we don't have all of the information yet on, what's going to be eligible, and frankly, what will be competitive we know, and working in underserved communities will be competitive, but we just don't have all of the guidance at this point for the Inflation Reduction Act and how that funding is going to get fully rolled out. But this is the time to be dreaming big, and showing me your priorities is really, really important, regardless of whether or not what you're putting in here will ultimately be eligible for funding going forward with this IRA funding, or hopefully with the state min relief funding that we're finger crossing, knocking on wood that we get. It puts it in my docket to try to find ways to fund these things. So we're pretty relentless. We've been working since 2017 to get private property funded, and we finally got a pilot something started now in 2022. So we will, when we hear that there's a need and a focus, we're gonna work to ensure that those things are done.
I'm really loving how Wildest Dreams is really filling up over here. That's why there's a couple of pages of it. So feel free to use this other one if you need to.
I love it. I'm surprised you didn't actually just use a photo of Taylor Swift in that.
I actually did have it there originally, but then I didn't want everyone to know what a Swiftie I was, because I thought it would be just a little weird. So I have it kind of stalled on wood utilization. We know that that's something that's super important and going to be an issue for sure moving forward, just generally because of where the wood goes currently here in the state of Minnesota. So we will be talking more about that at another time, just about District Energy's capacity, their desire to shift over to maybe not taking wood anymore and what that'll look like. So stand by for more information coming about that. Gail.
What is the federal government's interest in funding, additional people to help? A lot of times typically no funding has been available for that, but they want to create programs, but no funding to lead them. Is there anything different about this pool of funding compared to others in the past that would help some of these initiatives? Because they can't just happen by volunteers, right?
Right. Yeah, I'll let Jill answer that, but just from, I'll just interject briefly, just that, when we're talking about programmatic scale, we can't get there, especially at these kinds of numbers, I would say without people. So Jill, Valerie.
Yep, well said, Karen. Absolutely. A program of work must include capacity for what's being proposed. And so honestly, that is one talking point I didn't share, is that before anything gets approved, there will be an assessment of the likelihood of capacity. And if anyone feels like there isn't enough to do what's being proposed, that proposal will be kicked back. So be sure to include anything that you will need to make sure to carry the program work out.
And I want to add to that. So yes, so we're looking to add our capacity to ramp up for IRA specifically. When we look at funding that is, technically it's short term, right? So any grant, like if we were to apply for something with the Forest Service and we were to get that funding is available for 5 years. It kind of is variable as to whether or not the department would approve a full-time ongoing position for something with 5 years of funding. They will approve, so we are allowed as a state agency to have unclassified temporary employees, but the maximum amount of time we can have them for is 3 years before we either have to, do an additional, essentially another temporary position, or we would need to, obtain regular funding for it from the state. So we're working on it in advance, and my hope is that if we receive what I'm hoping we'll receive through state funding, we will be really well prepared to get this money out the door and hopefully add capacity to our local units of government as well. That's my hope. And there was another question in the chat, Jill, about the written description of what underserved and underrepresented means in the context of this funding. So there's the map in there as well. Jill, is there any additional information you want or are able to provide around that?
No, there isn't. What we know today, and again, this may change because of leadership above and beyond our program, but at least within the urban and community forestry program, our leadership has said that any justifiable mapping tool or definition of underserved community, so it could even be state specific or metropolitan specific, can be used. So we don't know between now and when the public facing RFP comes out, that may change from leadership at the USDA level or even the White House. But right now, we've been told that any tool, and there is no specific definition, and we've been pressing on that since this funding was announced to try to get a very specific definition of underserved, and we don't have that right now. Jen posted, thanks Jen for posting the link to what we're calling the CGEST. That is one tool that the White House Council on Environmental Quality put out last month. So that is something that we feel very confident that if there is a community in that tool that's been identified in that map, that is clearly underserved or underrepresented. We're hoping that this extension of an openness to other tools stays all the way through until, you know, for the whole rollout of the IRA RFP. But right now, we don't have anything more specific.
And historically, as a state, we've been using the MPCA's environmental justice areas of concern. The governor also has a definition of underserved within the state, which is definitely a bit broader. So it looks at, in addition, it looks at veterans and folks under, you know, a multitude of categories. And so, you know, that's ultimately what we've used in the past, and we'll wait to see if there's any additional discretion provided from the Forest Service. Yes. Thank you, Karen, with the Metro transit map. Yeah, there are a number of great tools out there. So, and Dylan Kelly, Dylan, I thought I saw your hand up, but it went back down. So maybe you had your question answered, or.
Sure, and I'm happy to jump in. This is something to put on the Jamboard here, but the issue about federal dollars not being able to be used to match other federal dollars came up earlier when we were talking about AmeriCorps programs, and it did just want to point out that there are a few federal agencies that have formally issued a letter saying that their grant dollars can be used as match for AmeriCorps dollars. These include things like the Department of Education, the Department of the Interior, Department of Transportation, and if the Department of Agriculture on behalf of the Forest Service were to issue that kind of a letter, it would really grease the wheels for being able to deploy more AmeriCorps members very quickly to support these efforts in the types of things that we've been talking about, as well as support some of the things that I'm seeing here, such as increasing the living stipend and so on for AmeriCorps members and things like that. So just something that I wanted to mention that would be very helpful in making AmeriCorps a stronger part of the implementing these projects.
Thanks, Dylan. I wasn't aware of those letters, so I will definitely deliver that message up to our leadership.
Thank you, I really
Yeah,
appreciate
thanks so much.
And while we're talking about getting messages up to leadership, Jill, one of the things that I spoke with some folks in Seattle about is this waiver becoming more broad. If there was any opportunity to talk about things like invasive species and response to storms as a way to waive that match for communities. So is that something that you think there could be an appetite for?
I think that right now the focus is entirely on underserved and disadvantaged communities. That's not to say that it couldn't couple like storm response or invasive species, but the underlying guarantee of a match waiver is really, and the more competitive projects will be those that focus on underserved communities. I
Great.
can ask the question though, Karen,
Yeah.
just like, I'll ask, but I
Sure.
know that at least in the first, what we're imagining is the first round.
Yep.
Yeah, there's going to be very little appetite for anything that is not focused on underserved.
Sure. And that makes total sense. I think that there's just an opportunity to just broaden that out to make it more accessible in those communities that are really being stretched by things like Emerald Ash Borer and other things. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep.
All right, we've got about 5 more minutes until we shift over to our forum. Does anyone, I haven't checked, let's see what the chat was looking at. Yes, we'll be sure to make sure all of this comes with you on the recording. And then, yeah, we were looking to do blue for needs, but I think we can sort it out in the end. And feel free to go back and edit as you wish along the way. So like I said, we will keep this open for at least until the end of 2022. And stay tuned. We are, Valerie, hoping to do more of this. This is, like Valerie said, just the beginning of these conversations.
I'm going to have to jump out in a couple of minutes. Valerie, is there any way you can either post your PowerPoint to the chat or send it out for us?
Yeah, absolutely. And Ryan has this recorded, so we can make this this video available alongside. So I think once we wrap this portion of it, I think that we can save this recording and push this out through the email news blast alongside the Jamboard link. And so that's I think the plan there. And then I'm happy to, I actually only got through half of my presentation. There's some more funding that's available through other programs, but this one is specific. This one is more specific to urban and community forestry. So we're, that's definitely our focus of work. So yeah, so that'll be available.
Here, maybe.
Yeah. So I mean, really, I think we wrapped this earlier. This is the main source of funding that we're going to be focusing on because it is dedicated to urban and community forestry assistance directly. That is its sole focus. So if you want to next slide it. There are a bunch of other line items within the Inflation Reduction Act. It's a, billions and billions of dollar, funding source for a bunch of different things. And I'm not seeing the next slide. Is it up? And I'm just not seeing it.
I'm showing
the
138.
Yeah, 138. Okay. Folks are okay. I'm still on. I'm only seeing 23003. So.
Oh shoot. Well,
are there folks seeing that, or I don't really know?
Section 138.
I heard a section 138. Maybe
you're seeing it. Okay.
Yep.
My computer could be being funky yet again. Excellent. Perfect. So this is another portion. I think that the key aspect of this is, so there's a lot of language to sift through. Frankly, if any of you are interested in getting the entire PDF, it's available online. But the key piece of this one specifically is, I think with the mitigating climate and health risks from urban heat islands and extreme heat, there is some potential there for funding around trees. So we are keeping the focus on that and just keeping it out to see whenever they come out with additional details, we'll be following up. And then if you want to jump to the next slide, 60501.
Okay, it's up for me now.
And thank you. Since I can't see it, I'll take it. So this one is, the primary focus is probably around departments of transportation. I think that there are going to be some potentials for trickle down to the more local community, but we'll kind of see how things are disseminated out. So there's, again, a bunch of language with this, but I think the key pieces to focus in on for us is mitigating or remediating negative impacts on human or natural environment resulting from a facility. So, and then the focus here is also, I mean, almost all of these are focused on underserved communities, but you'll also see in that section C there, natural infrastructure, pervious, permeable, or porous pavement, or protective features to reduce or manage stormwater runoff. So there's some additional focuses there that really fit into the form that we had today for potential funding sources for that. And if you want to next slide it.
Okay.
So these are some other ones that may or may not have impact. We don't really know. I'm keeping an eye out on them just in case, because there just is some potential. You know, I'd say especially on that section 60104, the diesel emissions reductions, the language around that is really similar to grants that the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency has had on getting diesel or replacing diesel with electric, especially around small engines like chainsaws and things like that. In the past, MPCA has had grants out to assist private and public entities in transitioning things from diesel to electric. So the language in here is suggestive that that is possible. So that's something to be aware of. And then same with that, so that 60106, the funding to address air pollution at schools. You know, kids are a really key element of the Inflation Reduction Act. It's listed out extensively. This is another one where they're really looking to reduce heat-related illnesses and things like that. We know that at face value, at least, that our schools have lower canopy cover typically than their surrounding areas. So this is another potential for those of you who work with your schools or are interested in working to get funding for that. That's another one we'll be looking for when these RFPs are released to see, you know, if we're eligible to move forward and if we have the capacity for it. So, so I think we can call it there. If folks have questions, I may not be able to answer them because, you know, this is all just language pulled from the legislative language and the bill itself, and things that I've just keyed in on around what I think will be workable as we go forward. So. That's all I got. If folks have questions, let me know. Feel free to reach out. My email address is somewhere in the chat there. Otherwise, you know, be safe and enjoy the wintry mix of the day.
Yeah, it's still coming down by me. I did have one. Maybe this is clear. I wasn't. Valerie, just help me clarify this. So when Jill was here talking about all of those things, will all those dollars be passed through you, and then organizations will apply competitively to you, or will people in Minnesota be applying directly to the Forest Service?
It'll be a mix.
Oh.
Is my understanding. My understanding is that there will be opportunity for all of those things. You know, because the way that they've been talking about it is being programmatic, I think that if there is potential to partner with other organizations and do things at a larger scale, because, you know, on their end, it's a lot of money. They have to get these contracts out. And if they can do it with these bigger partnerships, larger dollar amounts and things like that, I think that we have the potential to be just really competitive. We're stronger together is what I'm saying. So if I have potential to be a part of that, I'm happy to, and I would love to. If it doesn't make sense for us, I get that, and but I encourage you to create partnerships amongst each other to get these initiatives moving forward.
Super. Okay, awesome. Sorry to do the anticlimactic goodbye there.
I
Valerie.
was just, Ryan, if I can just offer just one other thing about that,
Sure.
especially when we're talking about this ongoing legislative requests for funding, you know, that is state money. So that could very easily be used as match, especially if it's coming together from a DNR put in proposal. So that could help us to alleviate some of that concern on the match
Absolutely.
side. So that's
Yes.
the advantage of us kind of going in together as a state proposal, just to use those match dollars that are available currently. So that would be just something to keep in mind.
And those that'll hopefully be available in the future. So
So we hope, yes.
we hope, fingers crossed.
All right, Ryan, did you want to do a song to take us out, or?
Oh, you
pretty
know,
please.
I think Zoom doesn't, I think the mics, it's looking for speech. It's not looking for melodic content. So I'm not sure I'm going to quite be able to offer that at this time, but I, can prepare for 12 months from now to put some ensemble work together for next holiday season.
Excellent. Well, thanks to everyone for joining us and for sticking around a little late. Sorry, we're not enjoying each other's company in the presence of each other, but we will do that in January. So fingers crossed for cooperative weather and a safe and happy holiday season to everyone. And look forward to exciting new initiatives in 2023. So with that, happy holidays.